All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Central Focus podcast. We're here with another episode. Really excited about what we got going on today. As is usually the case, I'd like to introduce my guest for today. My guest today is a certified mental health coach. He leads the Men of Freedom group in the Central Jersey Church of Christ. It's a sexual purity group. He has conducted classes, created courses, and mentored many men along his way to a life of freedom from sexual bondage. This is a guy for me that I respect tremendously. I respect his life. I respect his work in the Lord. He has been a great help to me over the years and a great help to many along the way. So with that, I'd like to welcome Aaron Clark to the podcast. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Caesar. It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you, man. Really excited for today. And so before we jump into some of the questions, I wanted to actually introduce our topic for today and just kind of sort of set the landscape for what this issue really kind of looks like, and share some facts with the audience. So the topic today is overcoming addiction to pornography. That's the topic for today. And I wanted to share some of these facts that I found, these statistics. According to an annual review, the United States is at the top of the list in regards to consumption of pornographic material. And so we are number one in that category. Another statistic here, 69% of men and 40% of women say that they view pornography annually. And men are 4 times more likely than women to report having watched pornography in the last month. Additionally, this is not a secret, the adult film and porn industry is a billion-dollar industry today. So this obviously remains a major challenge to our society. And as a result, it also remains a challenge to our churches. And so I'm really excited for what you bring to the table, Aaron, and your years and your experiences, to the table. So just to start, can you share a little bit about your story growing up and your experience when you were first exposed to pornography?
Sure. So was born in Newark, New Jersey. I was the first of my mom and dad, actually the only one of my mom and dad. Um, and city kid, you know, did all the normal stuff, like to play outside, like to watch too much TV, Saturday morning cartoons, all that fun
Mm,
stuff, video games, and play with big wheel. And pretty normal for someone that grew up in modest means. And one of my biggest things that I really loved to do was reading. Like there was like a whole bookshelf of different types of books, like encyclopedias, just different fictions, all that stuff. And so always kind of like kind of getting into that sort of stuff. And to your question about how I entered this, crazy world of pornography, because back then, this is back in the 80s, like it definitely was a different world than what it is today. Like you had to find it, you had to go look for it in order to see it. Like we didn't have cell phones. Probably the easiest way to access it was through magazines and on newsstands. Now, being a kid, I technically, had to be 18 in order to browse those things, but there are ways of kind of getting around that. And but really, the crazy thing is really how I was introduced to it. I was actually introduced to it through family.
mm,
My well, I won't say who, but there was a family member that I was staying with one day, and that person had cable. No, I didn't have cable at home. This person did. So just through flipping through the channels, I came across the Playboy channel. And that's really how I got introduced to it. And honestly, I was shocked. I didn't know what to think, but I was, wildly curious about it. So it was maybe for, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half, something like that. Because I finally remember I was in another room, like wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing.
Right.
And that's what planted the seed of what was out there.
Right.
And that led to me wanting to find it out in other places.
Right.
And so that's how I got introduced.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I relate a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people who will listen to this can relate to you. That was at least my earliest memory. That's how I was also exposed to pornography. Was, you know, I was visiting. I was at a family member's house, and they had, cable, and just flipping through the channels, and you stumble upon it, right? And then, obviously there was, a lot less rules at that time with regard to, the viewing of this kind of stuff. So yeah, I stumbled upon it, and of course that opens the door of curiosity. At what point in this journey for you did you realize that this was a real problem for you?
I saw that question and I was, I guess it's kind of like a two-parter.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, I knew it was a problem because it really became full blown in college
Mm,
with the internet.
right.
So that was where I was on one level because that's where it became a daily
Mm,
thing for me, and it persisted for years. Um, but ironically enough, I didn't even realize or made the connection to it being an addiction until my then fiance just posed the question if she if I thought that I was an addict.
mm,
And I had to think about it for a second. Now, mind you, at that point, I was in this struggle for probably like a good 15 years or so,
mm,
where this was a daily thing in one form or another. And I still didn't make that connection. Um, like now, a therapist I was talking to, or even just the little conversations I've had here and there, it was our fiance that asked the question. And when she did, I was hesitant for a second, but it was clear that I was. And that's when it really just became clear that I has a really serious problem, even worse than
mm,
what I thought it was.
mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. I think for many, I'm as a millennial, I'm kind of in this in between phase. I really, as the internet was growing, so was I, right? And so were many of us as millennials. And so, uh, you know, kind of along the way with the internet come in and not being as regulated. I mean, it's still not super regulated in certain respects, but even more so then, the access to it and the discovery of it. I mean, it was like a whole new world, really. And I think what came of that was this secret life, right? For me, I know for me, it was something I didn't talk about. It was a secret life. I know for many young people, and so I think, well, I appreciate you, obviously just sharing that in your story. And I know earlier you mentioned that it was your fiance that had posed the question to you, are you an addict? Now, obviously, for many people, they're resistant to even label it as such or even embrace that label, because of the shame associated with it, the stigma associated with it. So, and even in talking with you, I know, and even in reading your book, you frequently refer to it as addiction. And so, why would you say? Well, I guess first, how would you define addiction in in specifically in this area, sexual addiction? And why is it important to name it and label it an addiction and not just a bad habit?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for posing that. Because, yeah, when sorry for me growing up, when I heard the term addiction, like it was always kind of um geared towards people that had a drug problem or had a drinking problem. And it was usually just in those two contexts that the word was used.
Mm,
And and even when my fiance posed the question, like I didn't even heard of porn addiction or sex addiction. Like I don't even think that was even a certainly not a mainstream term like I as it is today. Um, but I do believe that the word is an appropriate one because and let me back up because there is still I think probably not as big of a stigma now as it was before, but I know it still can kind of trigger certain feelings and kind of certain hesitation. And to me, you could call it being ensnared. You could call it an obsession. You could call it being enslaved.
mm.
You could call it just a really bad pattern. Like I really don't care what you call
Yeah.
it, but it isn't. But it is
Yeah.
important that it really emphasizes that it's a pattern of behavior that no matter how hard you try, you
Mm,
can't stop. You can't get out of.
right.
And it's usually just a, because I think it's, again, it's easy to kind of think about someone that's a drug guy, alcoholic, it's like, and they'll tell you, it's like, they tried it and they can't stop.
Right.
Like if it was up to them, they just couldn't.
Right.
And there's a reason for that.
Right.
There's a very important reason why they can't. Like it's not a lack of willpower.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a lack of desire.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are other forces that at work that are putting you into this condition where you do have an addiction, and it's the same thing with pornography. Like it's not something you can just like if you've done it for a few weeks or a few months, few years, many years, you just can't stop
Right.
on the dime.
Right.
Now maybe some can, and my theory is those that can, it's usually because the issue is just about that. But I think for many, the issue, the deeper issue is connected to something else,
Right.
um, some trauma or some pain or just something in the that person's past that they needed healing from,
Right.
and that certainly was the case for me.
Mm,
So to me, that is what addiction is. It's a real thing. I know some people kind of think of it as a like a they have a disease model to it, whatever. And
yeah.
frankly, I call again, call whatever you want. That's fine with me. There definitely is a genetic kind of a connection to it. It definitely is a connection to the brain, to
Mm,
something that's in the brain pattern that's been altered
mm,
that needs to get rewired.
right.
So there is a physiological aspect to it.
Mm,
But at the end of the day, the way out is learning how to understand how that's connected
mm,
because the recovery plan has to take that into account. Because
right.
if it's just about stopping or setting up these boundaries or whatever, if it's just on that, it's like, and I say this in the book, it's like trying to heal someone that had a gunshot wound like it was a skin knee.
Yeah.
Like it's not gonna fully address the wound.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we like to try to think we can just do these little simple measures here and there just to get out of it because we don't really want to have the level of seriousness that we really need to have in order to really overcome it.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. Thank you for walking us through that. I wanted to just ask you this. This wasn't originally in my the notes I sent you, but could you just speak a little bit more? I'd like for you to just kind of describe a little bit of how difficult it was for you, or some of the obstacles that you faced along the way to really getting to a place of sexual recovery, a place where this was no longer a daily battle, although you might describe it as a daily battle still, but to the point where maybe again it just didn't look the same, where you had improved and you had grown. But can you just speak to like the obstacles, because I think I'd like for people listening to just be able to kind of just relate kind of a little bit to those challenges. So yeah, if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess probably the first obstacle, like say, just kind of starting out on this journey to want to recover from this, is you have to kind of recognize that this is a habit, like this
Mm,
is a pattern. It's a deeply etched pattern,
mm,
in your life. And in order for that pattern to be taken out of your life, you have to, number one, have a concrete plan of how to take it out. You know, and it's the daily decisions. Like, say, if your thing is like watching, stuff on your phone or on your computer, like you have to identify the where, when, and the how often that this behavior is taking place. Like, gotta make a list. Really objectively identify where those places are. Because the thing is, if you have multiple spots, then you gotta have a plan for all of them, because you're gonna naturally gonna want to gravitate to those places where you find comfort, you find
right.
it's easy just to relax and just kind of like not be, paying attention to what you're doing. Because certainly in my case, even if I wasn't looking to look at stuff, if I go into the places where I know I'd be comfortable, it was just a matter of time.
Mm,
If I was sitting there long enough, it was just a matter of time,
yeah.
because the yearning and the urges are going to come.
Right.
It just naturally will come. So that's one aspect of it. I think the biggest challenge I've seen, and certainly in my life, I've seen this, and this is why I think again the word addiction really is apropos here,
Mm,
is if you've known someone that has an addiction, like say to alcohol and to smoking, and they stop using, what happens? They go through withdrawal.
right.
And one of the signs of that withdrawal is they have a physiological responses where they get the shakes.
Yep.
You've probably seen that.
Mm,
And for me, when I kind of went through a time where I wasn't acting out, like maybe a few weeks or a few months or something like that, at some point I get that same sort of sensation, where it's just an overwhelming just uh, desire just to want to look. Like it's like I can't even describe
yeah.
it, but it's just a
Yeah.
overpowering feeling
Yeah.
that you just want to use.
Right.
And I find talking to different guys is like when they hit that point in the recovery, that's when they tend to kind of give up, or they
Right.
try to, you know, you know, like they don't learn how to push through those moments. And that for me is where the recovery journey really starts. Because like I said, when you start the outward behavior and start getting into some of the root causes and stuff, which is really what is kind of at work in that, that's when your the work really begins, because you gotta learn how to heal from those wounds, to identify those
Mm,
wounds, those traumas, and to um and whatever it is that you gotta do,
yeah.
whether it be, personally or through therapy, which I've done a lot of,
Yeah.
whatever that is, that's where you gotta really continue just to be consistent
Right.
in doing the work.
It's great.
And which again, this is why I say most people want to try to put a band-aid on
Right.
this thing and just keep it moving.
Right.
But sometimes you gotta stop and kind of go through a mini triage
Mm,
in order to get healed. And I think a lot of guys the way they kind of see themselves going through something like that. But that's, to me, that is perhaps the most critical stage in order to really be free.
Right.
Because otherwise, you could go through a few months, you're not acting out, and you'll have a your moment, but then that'll probably just become the new pattern,
Right. Right.
which will usually kind of delve back into something that'll happen more frequently. So
Right.
yeah, so working through the withdrawal, the trauma, and all that stuff.
Right.
That's to me is the most important
Right.
key to this.
So I really appreciate just you identifying I think the root causes. I think a lot of times we as people, and especially even within our specific family of churches, we've done a lot of work to sort of address the symptoms and not necessarily the root causes. And I think what I appreciate about how you approach this topic, not only do you approach it, in my opinion, with a lot of grace and compassion, which I've seen firsthand, I think you really try to get to the root causes. And I think unless work is really occurring below the surface, below that ground level, um, real change is going to be hard to come by. So I appreciate you kind of clarifying that. Can you share a little bit with us, like what are some of the most important elements for someone to sort of have on the path to recovery?
I'm sure. Well, it's always been my conviction since I started this journey is your number one weapon against, or number one weapon in recovery is open, honest relationships,
Mm,
which is kind of a good news because you don't need a book or a program in order to practice
right,
just sharing your life with someone.
right.
But it does take courage, and it does take a level of having the type of people that is going to be able to help to draw out the deeper things in you,
Mm,
because that's very important. Because we're all can kind of, you know how it is. We can just kind of be very surfacey in our conversations, and even
yep,
in our confession, or we can kind of gloss over, what it really is. To just kind of keep it moving. I mean, I've been guilty of that for many, many
yeah,
years. But you gotta be able to, again, get to specifics.
right.
And the more consistent that you are with the specifics, the greater chance you have of recovering long term.
Right.
And you see, that's something that has to, like how if your usage is daily, your openness has to be daily.
Mm,
And you gotta not only be daily in terms of if you acted out, committed a sin, you also got to learn to be daily in connecting to
right.
temptations, and because that's obviously the previous step to that. But also, prior to temptation is emotional pain.
Mm,
So if you're able to, which as guys, let's face it, us by and large, we are very um, lax in that
yep,
um, because of social expectations, family structure. Like I was very common for me growing up. Like I was not trained in talking about my
right,
feelings. I was just trained in doing.
right.
That was the girl's job to talk about feelings like that. So these are the things that we have to catch up in as men
Right.
by and large. So if we're able to kind of work our way back to talk about the acting out, then learning how to talk about the talk about the temptation, talking these on a temptation level, that's gonna one, make it much harder for you to get to that acting out
Right.
level because when you're speaking and when you're sharing, those are where your needs are being met.
Right.
And that's what the Bible talks a lot about walking in the light,
Right.
and the rewards that come from that. So the more that we're able to kind of work back along that string, like earlier on, you know, you're going to find that you're not going to have that yearning as you did before.
Right.
Because that, to me, that's where a lot of the acting out is stemming from. So if you're um, getting consistent in that. And again, that's something that requires work, that requires learning,
Yeah.
that requires having the right tools to help you to identify where those things going on, in your heart.
Mm.
But it all starts with open, honest
Yeah.
relationships.
That's great. No, I think that's so key, and I think I know that's been helpful for me in my Christian walk. Period. With you know, obviously, uh, things like lust, sexual immorality, it is one of, I'm sure, many other sins that a Christian will have to wrestle with. And obviously, the enticing nature of it, it makes it a unique battleground as far as sin goes. But all sin has a kind of pull, a kind of draw, a kind of, hey, in the moment this feels good, right? Um, but I have found, be it if I'm battling with lust, um, or if I'm battling with anger, I'm battling with impatience, I'm battling with selfishness, that God really made relationships for a reason, especially in the church, that there is purpose to it, that there is something about our ability to flourish and thrive as people that that we were just made for a relationship. We were made for it and we thrive with it. And so I see a lot of God's wisdom in that. Um
Yeah.
and
Or if I may, if I want to add
go
something
ahead.
to that, because you make great points, but I do want to, for the audience that's going to be hearing this, it's important to just acknowledge some basic truths. I think especially us as men,
Yep.
because one of the things that, certainly in my early years as a Christian in the environment of the church at that time, in terms of how they dealt with this, um, unfortunately, I think in that it kind of really glossed over just some basic truths
Mm,
about who we are, which is simply this: we were designed to be moved by what we see,
mm,
and especially in terms of looking at women. I
right.
mean, this is how you know family structures were made. That's how families were formed. Like
Yeah.
that's an innate urge, the sex drive. And you see, we gotta be in a space where we have to acknowledge
Mm,
that it is okay to recognize beauty,
right.
like wherever it
Right.
is. Like we gotta be able to do that. And I think it is right. And I think it is we can certainly do that in a pure way.
Right.
Because I think we kind of put somewhere kind of a stigma of shame to that.
Yeah.
And somewhere in there it just kind of got,
Right.
kind of mixed up in that. So I think for guys and they're trying to learn how to be pure, like the cure, so to speak, is not to act like women ain't pretty.
Right.
Like it's kind of like the same thing as like going to a monastery and just women in there, because like that's like the
Right.
extreme of that, because you're not going to see anyone,
Right.
and so you think that there's going to be no temptation,
Right.
but that's not reality.
Right.
Like we have to get out of our nest, so to
Yeah.
speak, and get out into the world. So guess what? We're going to be seeing women,
Right.
and we're going to see a lot of women. And we're going to see, and a lot of them are going to be, they're going to catch your eye.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's, but again, that's natural.
Hmm.
That's a natural, you feeling. So obviously, we got to learn to practice self-control
Right.
in those moments, but it doesn't mean to not look. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like you're gonna have like a look, it's gonna like wow, catch your eye, whatever. But it's like anything. If you're able to still keep going forward
Right.
and just keep moving forward, then it's not going to linger
Right.
in you. So I really just want to put that out there to
Yeah.
the guys, because if you say you're feeling like wow, I'm just having all these urges and things like that, and then especially as young men, you're especially going to have that because
Yeah.
you're still in puberty. All those hormones are just at their peak.
Right.
So yeah, and you're thinking about who I want to, have a relationship with. All that's natural and
Yeah.
that's good. God made us that way.
Yep.
So as long as we're leaning on God through that process, we'll be fine.
Right.
But I say that because sometimes we can kind of have in our head, kind of accuse ourselves of wrongdoing before we actually committed any
Mm.
wrongdoing. That's all I wanted to say on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think noticing and lusting, right? Acknowledging beauty and lusting after it. They're the it can feel like a fine line, but there is a line that exists. To
Oh
be
yeah.
able to just acknowledge something, or someone, as beautiful. And so I appreciate you saying that. I think along those same lines, I think God created sex. So sex is, it cannot be bad, right? Um, how we as humans take something and use it for our own purposes, that's when typically the wrongdoing occurs, right? But God in itself, it created sex. Sex is not bad. I know sometimes even saying the word sex is like a bad word, um, right, in some circles, and I
Oh yeah.
think there have been a lot of education, especially within the international churches of Christ, more education being shared about how to really have a healthy view of sex, a godly, a biblical view, a spiritual view of sex. And so I appreciate you just kind of even drawing that distinction, and it brought to my mind just the idea that no, God created it, it was good, it's meant, as an expression of love between husband and wife, and when it's used in that way, it is the most satisfying that it could be. And so anyway, so I just wanted to kind of add that
Mhm.
to the conversation. Um, and so I
Mhm.
want,
If I might just
yeah,
add,
go.
I'm I'm sorry. I know you're trying
No, you're
to.
good.
I know you got
You're
other places
good.
stuff, but
Go for it.
you got other things stirring to me because because you made me thinking about just again my early years as a Christian, and even before that, like for me, sex was a dirty word,
Right.
which is why no one really talked about it with me. Like not my parents,
Mm,
no one. So really, all that I learned about it was through kind of you know, peers that didn't know anything about it. They thought they knew or whatever. And well, pornography. I mean, I still, had all these urges and stuff, and I had to do something with it. So it was very easy to kind of make that, kind of that connection
yeah.
to that. But I think that part of the problem with that is because it was looked at in that way, it became this forbidden idea.
Mm,
It's like the forbidden fruit.
right.
So it was like, but you know how we are with things that are forbidden.
Right.
We're going to find a way to get to it.
Right.
That's just how we are. That's our simple nature.
Right.
We aren't just going to honor the boundaries of something being wrong. It's like,
Right.
no, that's going to entice us
Right. We
more
want to test those, but
to
yep.
it.
Yep.
So, yeah, so I think and certainly in my generation, that because of that, I think that's what kind of led to people having the wrong idea
Mm,
or really just learning on the fly end up through making mistakes that they didn't have to make
right.
in order to really learn more about what it really
Mm,
is. But I also see how even in like I heard of one family member, not a family member, but someone in the church was sharing about how in their family the topic of purity is a consistent one.
mm,
Like it isn't this one quote unquote birds and the bees talk, and then just kind of kept it moving from there because that's kind of what I kind of had.
mm,
So the idea that in a family structure that this is a continual conversation was crazy foreign to me.
mm,
I'm like, really? Wow.
mm,
But I think that's such a healthier way,
yep.
and honestly, age appropriate discussions. But the point is, it's not a taboo subject.
Right. Right.
So I think that's where so and I don't know how many, families do that or whatever, but the point is, sex has to be a continuing conversation, and it should be in the family.
Right.
So I feel like that should be the first place
Right.
that we talked about.
Right.
Like, kids should be able to come home and ask their parents if they have a questions or they heard something, and to get honest, age appropriate
Yep.
answers, because then it won't become this um mysterious taboo thing.
Right.
So
Yeah. No, I think,
that's
yeah,
all.
I think you bring up a great point just about even having these conversations, from a young age, and age appropriate conversations, obviously using the right language. And I'm sure there are tons of books that I have yet to read because I'm not in that, uh, you know, stage of life just yet. But um, I'm sure when that time comes, I will be looking for those books. But I appreciate you bringing that up, just the importance of having those conversations within the family, and that education really needs to begin there, especially if you're going to teach what sex is from a godly point of view, from a spiritual, biblical point of view, and not just whatever the education system, whatever the schools are willing or wanting to teach your kids about the topic. So I think that's really important. Earlier you had
Yeah, I
mentioned,
mean,
um, sorry to cut you off. You want to add one last thing to
okay.
that?
I was just
Go
gonna
ahead.
say, oh yeah, I wanted to say this earlier, I forgot, but there's a whole book in the Bible
Mm,
that talks about sex.
right,
And guess what? As a young Christian, was kind of steered away from reading that.
right,
You know, and I get why. I understand why. But the truth is, God put a whole book in His Bible
right,
about sexual intimacy.
right.
And let me tell you, it runs rings about the garbage that's out there, these romance
Yeah,
novels and stuff. But hey, if there's a whole book in the Bible that that we can look at
right.
and understand that, clearly this is something that's important to God. This is something He felt should be known, understood, and celebrated.
Yep,
Yes,
yep.
that's all. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Definitely, I too was steered away from reading the Songs of Solomon as well. But I appreciate your comment on that. I wanted to. I know earlier you had mentioned relationships as being such an important part of someone's recovery. Now, can you speak to? Uh, so I think sometimes for young people, the temptation is to only confess to their friends, right? It's safer, and obviously I'm not saying that that's bad. I think good, confess to your peers, your fellow brothers and sisters in the same stage of life. Um, but can you speak to having the right kind of people in your corner? What kind of people should people be looking to have in their corner?
Excellent question. And this is very, very important because one of the things that I really try to emphasize to people that I talk to and really encourage is the idea of building your
Mm,
community. Like, you should be able to have a community of people where you can be your most authentic self, if whatever that is. And here's the thing, that community, is not going to be that for all areas of your life. Like, there may be other people that are more of that, depending on your particular needs or, issues or whatever. But there should always be people that you have that you can go to speak about whatever it is that's that you need help in.
mm,
So let me apply that to your question. I agree that let me say this: peer relationships are absolutely
yep,
critical. Like my peer relationships are like going back you know 25, 30
yep,
years, and these are some of my closest friends to this very day, and I'm always going to be grateful for them. And there is a level of being able to share those challenging things with each other and to help each other as best you can. So there's definitely a space for that. But there also needs to be a space for the people that are ahead of you
Mm.
in this.
Mm.
Like you gotta have something that a target to aim for. Someone that you look at their life and say, like, that's what I want. Like, and you see that, hey, that person overcame the things that I'm struggling with right now.
Yeah.
It's like, I need to learn what they did.
Yeah.
And so this gets into the, you call it the discipling relationship, the mentoring relationship. Uh, like someone that's older, that's just in a different place of life. See, those are the type of people that you need to have in your community.
Right.
Like, it's not this thing where they're in the struggle like you are. It's like, no, they're in a completely different place. So when they can come to you, one, what you share with them, one, it's not going to be any surprise to them. Two, they're going to be able to have a level of empathy and compassion on you. And that's going to be able to walk you through how to come out of that.
Right.
So they're not going to be the ones that are going to be like, they're going to quote unquote rebuke you, challenge you, correct you. Or if it's done from a place of grace. It's done from a place of love. And usually someone that's older understands those things because
Right.
they've been through that. They've made the mistakes and they know what not to do more than
Yeah.
anything. And at the very least, if they're not able to kind of give you a pathway out, they can definitely be a great listener
Yep.
to you, and they're not going to try to, fix you or to impart on something on you that they know that they don't have.
Yeah.
So that type of person is also important too. But I'm talking about the one that has been through what you're going through now, and they can speak to, what can help you get out because the biggest thing that they're going to be able to do is just share from their own life.
Right.
See, just in that, the other person is going to draw a lot of encouragement because one, they're going to realize, hey, they're not alone.
Right.
They're not going crazy. Like they're totally
Right.
normal. And they're going to see, and it's going to bond them with those type of people. And they're going to want to continue just to learn from
Yeah.
them. And to me, in my experience, like so many young men have come to me and just, or just wanting just to learn
Right.
and just wanting to hear my story. And to me, it's like, hey, I'm gladly.
Yep.
I'll tell you wherever you want to know.
Yeah.
Like, it's no big deal to me.
Right.
This is my life. Like, it's an open book,
Mm.
and that's what helps build trust,
Right.
and that's what helps build a bond
Yeah.
in the in the community
Yep.
in your church community. So again, it goes back to relationships, and so I think obviously it's going to start with having the courage to put yourself out there with someone.
Right.
And you know, and I know for a lot of people they've had very bad experiences
Mm.
with that. Like they've gotten burnt,
Right.
sad to say.
Right.
And our heart goes out to those because I know that they're just looking for help.
Right.
And perhaps they're being misunderstood or labeled in a certain way that wasn't right. So I know that that's definitely a big thing that we're gonna certainly as a body, as a general body, we gotta really repent of. And I'm talking like especially amongst the leadership
Right.
of these
Right.
churches. Because I've heard all kinds of horror stories of leaders being too harsh or being too overbearing.
Right.
And so they have to kind of go outside of their church body to get the help they need. Which to that end, I say do whatever you got to do.
Right.
If you're gonna, if your community is outside your church community, go there.
Right.
Because I know that God wouldn't want you to be in a situation that's not helping to build you up.
Right.
And especially if it's being done in his name, because I know that's something he completely detests.
Right.
Like he's the one that, like Jesus talked about, that he will go after the one lost sheep, like he'll leave the 99.
Right.
to rescue the one that was lost. See, it's the same idea here. If you're the lost one and you're looking for a shepherd, he is going to provide what you
Right.
need. And you just gotta, in one sense, have the courage to take that step. Because for a lot of people, they are afraid to do that for fear of kind of rocking the boat or whatever. For me, that's what I had to do.
Sure.
I had to go outside of my church community and find a new one.
Right.
And God provided
Right.
it, and it definitely was tremendous. And the beautiful part about it is it allowed me to build that type of environment in my local church
Right.
community, and it's just kind of went on from there. But the truth of the matter is, people are in different places with this stuff.
Yep.
Some people are just they're not educated, or they're just afraid. They're very unsure about how to approach, because this is a very sensitive topic.
Yeah.
It's a delicate topic, and
Yep.
the things that it can branch out into are, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I get that, and I hear that, but it doesn't mean that people can't grow in how they present themselves to those that are looking
Right.
for some sort of help or some sort of guidance. And this is why it's really big on my heart to really connect to, you know, your generation and those, and the younger ones, because I am just, it breaks my heart knowing the things that they're going through. Because, like I said, in my generation, you had to sort of kind of look for it,
Yeah.
the hidden points. Today, it's just there.
Right.
It's just in your face every time you pick up your
Yep.
smartphone.
Yep.
Like I try to think where I would
Right.
be if I was their
Right.
age in this time.
Yep. Yep.
It's gotta be just so overwhelming and just like,
Yep.
where do you find relief?
Right.
Where do you find respite from it?
Yep.
And I believe there's a way through that. But again, we have to acknowledge of what we're in, like what the world is, right now, and what we as Christians are, walking in each day. It is that much harder
Yep. Yep.
for us to be pure and to be that, and
Definitely.
for someone that's just learning about their journey, learning about their faith, just trying to, build on it. That's a lot to
Right.
fight through.
Definitely.
But this is why, again, it's so important for people to, one, feel that they can build their community, with God's help, and they don't have to put any limits on that. So whether it be relationships in church, relationships outside of church, professional therapy, counselors,
Yeah. It's great.
what it could be complete strangers.
Yeah.
People need to feel that it's okay,
Right. Right. Because
that they're not wrong.
right. Because I think,
I'm sorry, I know I went all along the thing.
yeah. I think if you feel like your local church does not have the resources to support your particular challenges, and there are professionals or there are groups outside that do have the resources, if you're looking to overcome this, why not go there? Right. So I appreciate you speaking to that, and the importance of that, and I think sometimes when it comes to confession, the challenge is, the challenge becomes, like, for us, there's so much shame. I said game, shame and guilt associated
Hmm.
with this, that, it's sometimes safer to, hey, let me talk to my friend. Let me confess to my friend who may be struggling with the same thing. And I think it's not an either or, it's a both and, right? Because for me, the challenges that I had when I've failed in with regard to my own purity, I needed my brothers there, my peers there, on a day-to-day basis, to be able to talk to confess to talk things through, to game plan through, to strategize with. Like, I think that peer relationship is crucial. But then, like you said, I think having somebody ahead of you, it gives you kind of this glimmer of hope. This glimmer of hope, somebody who maybe is on the other end of something, who has maybe overcame, and you can look at their life and look at their example and say, oh, okay, it is possible. Like right now, I'm sort of in the gutter right now and how I feel, but there is a way out, and so that's what having someone ahead of you. That's what it can do for you and do for your recovery. So I appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to uh, just have you speak a little bit on shame and guilt and sort of how they can sort of interfere with the recovery process. You could speak to that briefly. Um, and then I guess along the same lines, is there any word of hope that you can offer to someone who's listening to this who might be struggling, who might be stuck? What kind of words of hope might you offer to them?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, this is one of the most critical things that we have to understand about um, how to recover from this. And the thing is, it was one of the first things in the one of the first stories in the Bible. The issue of guilt and shame came up, which I think is going to refine a really beautiful um, kind of a way that God has set up out of that, if we're able to kind of look at it. But so we all know the story of Adam and Eve, and they eat the forbidden fruit. They realize what they did. What's the first thing they did? They hid. They hid from God, and they covered themselves. And and it took God to call them out, to find them, and to have the conversation with them, which tells me that they probably, if God didn't find them, I don't think they were ever going to go back to him. I mean, that's conjecture on my part. I don't know,
Sure.
but again, that's human nature.
Right.
We do something wrong, we hide. Why? Shame. And the shame is that feeling of not even that we did something wrong, but that there's something wrong with me.
Right.
So we put our identity
Right.
to the behavior, to the
Mm,
sin.
mm,
And so we kind of conflate another idea to that. You know, because it's funny, like God never said that if you eat the forbidden fruit that you were no longer going to be my children. Like He never said that. Like, there were consequences to that, but it had nothing to do with who they were. Before they you know did wrong. So I think that's the first thing. We gotta separate our identity from the
right.
behavior,
It's good. That's
because
good.
that's where the shame
Yep.
is. Shame is we connect identity to the behavior, and you see, guilt is recognizing that we did wrong.
Hmm.
See, that's
Right.
healthy. That we should, if we did wrong, like, and guilt is not so much a feeling as it is a
Mm,
condition or a reality.
right.
And maybe
It's a
I don't know if the technical term is connected to an
right.
emotion, but the bottom line is it is a state. Like our
Right.
court of law
It's a fact.
doesn't
Right.
say, yeah, it's a fact. So we gotta be able to separate truth from
Mm, mm,
emotion. So I think that's the kind of like the key
yep.
to dealing with shame.
Shame.
Now
Right.
I'm sorry I have to ask. Did I answer your question? I know there was
Yep.
another part to
Yep.
the question
Yep.
I kind of
That
forgot.
was the first part. Speaking of shame and guilt. And then just if you have a sort of a word of hope to someone out there that's maybe listening to this, that's kind of like really going through it, really having some challenges with regard to their purity. What kind of word of encouragement or word of hope might you offer to them?
Oh, okay, gotcha. Well, let me share just a quick thing that happened to me. So I was like in the throes of my, the deepest parts of my struggle. Like I was, I had nowhere to turn.
Mm,
I felt like I was becoming resigned to the fact that this was just going to be my thorn in the flesh for the rest of my
mm,
life. Like I just didn't see any way out. Because again, I was coming from the place of that this was just a behavioral issue that I just couldn't shake.
right.
So I was connecting it to kind of what Paul was saying about praying this prayer to remove this thorn. And God said, like, my grace is sufficient for you
mm,
because my power is made perfect in weakness. So I kind of just haven't had that. Okay, somehow maybe this is just what it is for me in this. Now, what I didn't know was again how complex this issue was for me. And it wasn't until I reached out to an elder who was also a Christian counselor in another
mm,
congregation, and I was sharing with him what was going on, and he was the one that was basically schooling me about the brain
mm,
and about how this thing works. Like it isn't just a issue of the well. Like there are physiological things going on that I just had no clue on. No one told me.
mm.
No one understood this.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things. Like when he said that, I just felt like I felt a certain level of relief
Mm,
because I realized that this isn't all my fault.
right.
Like this is all on me.
Mm,
Like there are things that are happening outside of me that are going on that I didn't know,
right.
that I was ignorant of. So in a weird way, it kind of gave me it gave me hope that okay, like it planted the seed that it is
Mm,
possible to overcome
it's
this.
great.
Now it still took a little while for the right people to really start to break that down to
Right.
me. But I guess to your question, it, it I guess for me, the hope is really believing and really seeing that God has, excuse me, God still loves
Mm,
me and that he still believes in me. And it's just not just this nice religious thing to say, but because I think what I kind of started thinking was, again, I just felt like God was just kind of resigned to that's just what it was for me and, whatever. But that's not his
mm,
nature. Like, he's not wanting to settle for me to be in this state.
mm,
Certainly not as his child for crying out loud.
right.
Like that's not what he wants.
Right.
It's like he's gonna do whatever it takes. He's gonna provide whatever his children need to come out of this. Honestly, the biggest thing they always provide was the cross. But there's so many other things that he also
Yeah.
provides that we that can help us if we will only you know, learn to tap into that. So yeah, so it's partly if you're ignorant of that, it's learning and finding out. And I think again, God in his way will bring those things to
Yeah.
you. Don't ask me how, he just does.
Yeah.
That's what he's done for me. So for you, so for the guys out there that are just you're discouraged, you're distressed, you don't see a way out. Um, let me just say, one, I get
Mm,
it. I hear you. You know, my heart goes out to you, and but also, but understand that God is not looking at you in any way where He's disappointed at you, like He's not looking down His nose at
mm,
you in some condescending way,
mm,
like He's not mad at you. He's not. And I think again, this is kind of gets into how we kind of connect. We kind of put these characteristics of God from our relationships with our fathers, because they weren't perfect people
right.
and they did things to us that are very etched into our conscience,
Right.
rightly or wrongly, or rightly and wrongly. And so it's easy for us to put those characteristics on God, which have nothing to do with his nature. So that's why I'm saying these things to say, hey, think about, Jesus with the sinful woman. Like, think about how he restored her
Yeah.
dignity. Like, she didn't put her down, didn't throw in any way any scorn or judgment or anything like that. Like, he loved her, he protected her
Mm,
from the crowd, and he gently restored
mm,
her, with forgiveness, with mercy. It then gave her a call to
Right.
action, which is to go and sin no more. See, Jesus wouldn't have done that without first laying out the
Right.
forgiveness. Because you see, that is so
It's
important.
good.
And I think that's what, like, we don't know what happened to the woman afterwards, but there's no way that she didn't leave that situation tremendously
Right.
impacted, in a way that it was
Right.
before. So that's really what I want to offer to you guys out
It's
there,
great.
that God is not done with you.
Mm,
He is not nearly done with you. He still has an incredible plan for your lives. And he sees you in your pain and your despair. And he's going to, in this way, in his timing, provide all that you need. So just let that sink
yeah.
in. Let that, if you need to write down something to help reply you, remind you of that, sing about that, whatever. Like, don't lose sight of that.
Right.
Like, even if it feels like this distant thought of feeling, just hold on to that. Because in time, you will, you know, learn
Yeah.
what you need to learn to fight this thing, and you can overcome. It won't be easy, it's going to take time. But I promise you, if you're committed
Mm,
to doing what it is that you got to do, you will reap a harvest.
mm,
Like, again, that's a promise from God,
yeah.
and God's not about to say something and it not be true.
Right.
Like, He's going to see it through
Right.
until the work is done.
Amen.
So,
Amen. Thank you so much, Aaron, for that word. We're going to bring it in for a landing here. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, Aaron is an author. He authored his first book. It's called The Freedom Path: How I Overcame Pornography, and So Can You. It is a great book. A lot of wisdom within the pages of this book. Aaron, I want to give you an opportunity. Can you just share with the people just uh, what's going on with that? When is it coming out? I know you have a part in certain elements of your book already out. Can you just speak to, just give us a little bit of an advertisement, if you will, of your book here?
okay, yeah. So, so I just said this is my first book. Uh, it's something that God really inspired me to write. Just a few months ago, like back in March. Like, I honestly had another book in mind that I wanted to do, but God just said, "No, this is the book you need to
Mm,
write," and it made so much sense because it's very simply, it's a book about my
yeah.
journey. It's a book about my journey, about how I, you know, and the word of pornography, how God brought me out, and what um, some of the things that I've done since then. But it's really a book about the lessons that I've learned along the
Right.
way, just different principles, different tools. There's tons of scriptures in there. I taught a lot of scriptures um, to this because, yeah, it was obviously very key, to my recoveries. And it just helped me to see God in just in new and amazing ways. So really what the book is 12 chapters. It's about it's under 200 pages. It's a very easy read. That's why I designed it that way. I I designed it for just to be kind of like a step-by-step guide to one understanding, a little bit how this thing works and what are the keys to coming out of
Mm,
it. It's meant to kind of equip you to um, approach overcoming this in the most holistic way possible. So it's not just about these practicals of don't do this, don't do
right.
that. Like, that's not what this is about. Like, it's more of a way to help you kind of put your kind of thoughts and stuff together. Like I said, there are scriptures to meditate on, and there's also key questions that are designed to help you just to give you time just to really think and to ponder different aspects of your life, your
That's great.
struggles.
Yep.
And just the different key things. So it's a great book. I mean, it's for
Yeah.
anyone. I think it's going to be a great book to just to talk about in a group
Yep.
setting. You could use the questions to talk about together, and it's really designed is to leave you with tremendous hope for yourself.
Mm.
Like the last chapter of the book is just specifically about celebrating
It's great.
and the importance of just celebrating
Mm.
recovery,
Mm.
because this should be because
Right.
God celebrates us when we repent. Luke 15 talks all about that.
Mm.
And so I think it's something that we have to, that we should embrace in this journey. Like it shouldn't be this thing where we see this as this arduous task that is just going through day to day. And then we just come out the other end and we're just kind of, feeling kind of, not happy or more positive about where we're at. Like, no, we should feel great about who we are.
Amen.
We should feel great
Yep.
about, you know, the steps that we're taking. So those are the things that that the book gets into. Like there's some resource materials that the other materials in the back that helped me along the
It's great.
way. But yeah, but it's just going to be just a
Yeah.
simple blueprint
Yep. And
to how
so
to
and you
overcome.
have an Audible version out right now. And then can you just share about when your the physical copy is going to become available?
Yes. So all this is through Amazon. Praise
Amazon.
God for Jeff Bezos because I don't have to put up one penny in
Yep.
upfront costs,
Hey, that's
and
great.
I'm basically able to come out with 4 different formats.
Mm.
I mean, go figure that. So yes, so the audio version is out right now, and all this is on, like I said, on Amazon. So if you were to look up the Freedom Path by Aaron Clark, like the pages show up, and you'll see all the options there. So right now, there's two. It's the Audible version, which you can download right now. You can pre-order the Kindle version. Um, and that version and the other two, the hardcover and the paperback, those are going to be available on November 8th.
November 8th.
That's when
Okay.
that opens up. And obviously, it's made to order. So wherever, how long it takes for them to put the book together,
Hmm.
whatever. But at least in the print versions, the Kindle will be available once it's
Great.
released. And that's it.
Great. So November 8th, be on the lookout for the Freedom Path. Get your copy today. You're not going to want to miss it. I had a chance to go through it, and there's so much wisdom, so much practical advice, so much hope throughout those pages. And Aaron, I just want to thank you, brother, for being so vulnerable, so open with your life with regard to a topic that many feel shame for. And many people, many Christian young men, many Christian adult men are struggling with this. And I think your book, your advice, your wisdom is so needed. And so I want to thank you for that. And thank you for coming on to the podcast today, brother. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I appreciate you. And yeah, thank you, man.
Thank you for having me. This was great. And if anyone out there wants to reach out to me, you can email me at freedom@coachaaronclark.com. If you want to reach out to me anonymously or whatever, we want talk whatever. But Caesar, thank you for giving me this platform to talk about this. This was tremendous, great conversation. And I definitely wish you well on your
Yeah,
podcast. I pray you continue to grow and expand in this reach.
I appreciate it. Thank you, brother. We'll talk soon.
You got
All
it.
right.